Let's talk about the lost world of Sundaland. Our world has continuously changed over the course of its, 4 billion year existence. And one of these changes are land masses that we lost to the rising water. My name is Kaylee, and if you are familiar with my work, you will know that I am immensely intrigued by land masses lost to the sea. So it's about time I looked into the lost world of Sundaland. If you've been following me in my work for a while, you will know that I have made numerous videos on Doggerland, the lost landmass here in northwestern Europe. I have 2 of those videos on my own channel, and I've done 2 collaborations with other YouTubers about, the lost landmass of Doggerland. But Doggerland isn't the only landmass that we have lost to the rising sea levels since the Mesolithic. In fact, there's actually another equally as important and intriguing landmass in Southeast Asia that existed for roughly 2 million years, and it was called Sundaland. This is where Homo erectus migrated to when they left the continent of Africa, and this area was once home to numerous, now extinct, human species. A lot of people who watched my videos on Homo erectus kept asking me how Homo erectus made their way to the modern-day Indonesian islands some, 1.6 or 1.5 million years ago. They were wondering if Homo erectus created rafts or other forms of water transportation, but the answer seems to be much, much easier. They simply just walked. And if you're not familiar with Sundaland and how that landmass looked like in ancient times, this sounds absolutely fucking preposterous. Pardon my French, I know. But here you have a map of what the landmass would have looked like, and you can clearly see that Homo erectus simply just walked to what we know in modern times as the Indonesian islands. Because back then, they simply weren't islands yet, they were mountain ranges. Okay, but how is all of this possible? Well, the answer to that has everything to do with the Earth's climate. Our planet has experienced at least 5 major ice ages throughout its history, and the current ice age started somewhere around 2.5 million years ago. But wait, Kaylee, the last ice age already ended. How can you say that we are still in an ice age when it had already ended? I know, it sounds weird, but let me explain. You need to understand what an ice age is, so that you are able to understand that we are actually currently still smack dab in the middle of an ice age. And why is that? Well, it all has to do with the presence of glaciers, and that shows that we are currently in an ice age. But Kaylee, there's a global warming panic with climate change and people saying the Earth is warming up, and how can we even be in an ice age right now? Well, to answer that, you have to understand that an ice age has cold glacial periods, which is a cold phase where the ice sheets advance, sea levels drop, and the climate is colder, drier, and often dustier. But it also has warmer interglacial periods, which is a warmer period within an ice age where the glaciers retreat, sea levels rise, and the climate becomes more temperate. We are currently in one of those interglacial periods, and this warm period that we are currently in started some 11,700 years ago, when we entered the current geological epoch, which is now known as the Holocene. And there are short-term climate shifts within these periods as well. There are stadials, which are short-term cold spells within a glacial period, and there are interstadials, which are short-term warm spells within a glacial period. But as long as the ice sheets cover Greenland and Antarctica, we are considered to be in an ice age. And you might wonder, haven't we always had glaciers on the North and South poles? Well, the answer to that is actually no. We haven't. Our planet has not always had glaciers, and thus it has not always experienced ice ages. In fact, for the majority of Earth's history, our planet has actually been a whole lot warmer, and there was no ice on the poles. But the earliest ice age that we know of occurred roughly 2 billion years ago. So what does all of this ice age, glacial, interstadial, stadial, interglacial talk have to do with Sundaland? Well, without having an understanding of the ice sheets, the cold spells, the warm spells, the sea level rising and lowering, you won't be able to comprehend that the islands of Indonesia and Malaysia were once above sea level. quite a bit above sea level and connected to mainland Southeast Asia, as you can see on the screen. Sundaland was at its largest when sea levels were the lowest, which was around 120 meters lower than the sea levels are today, which would have exposed a landmass around the size of the modern-day country of India, making it possible for animals and ancient, now extinct humans to walk from, let's say, China through the modern-day countries of Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia to the modern-day islands of Sumatra, Java, Bali, and Borneo in Indonesia. It's actually possible that even the island of Flores was once connected to the mainland of the lost world of Sundaland, although it probably would have split off a bit earlier than the rest of the flooding of Sundaland. But this could explain how Homo erectus was able to reach it, and of course the younger enigmatic species of Homo floresiensis that emerged on the island of Flores. We know their ancestral species must have reached the modern-day Flores island at one point in history. Sundaland was located on the Sunda Shelf, which is the tectonic extension of the Southeast Asia continental shelf, and the eastern boundary of Sundaland is the Wallace Line, which is a faunal boundary line and corresponds to a deep water channel that has never been crossed by any land bridges. And therefore the animals on one side of the line are completely different from the animals on the other side of the line. During the late Pleistocene, which is an epoch in the geological timescale that started around 5.3 million years ago and ended around 2.58 million years ago, the exposed area of Sundaland on the Sunda Shelf was a whole lot less than it is today. Way more land would have been submerged during this period in time, because we were not in an ice age back then. But for the past 2.5 million years or so, the landmass of Sundaland has been exposed and thus above sea level. Most of the time anyway. And it wasn't until about 18,000 years ago that the land of Sundaland started to become partially submerged. And this sea level rise continued until around roughly 5,000 years ago, when the area was as submerged as it is in modern times, with the islands of Indonesia and Malaysia no longer being connected to the mainland of Southeast Asia. So now that we have an understanding of what Sundaland was, how it came into existence, what an ice age is, and that the planet hasn't always been in an ice age, and how Sundaland actually eventually disappeared, it is time to take a look into life on Sundaland. It seems like Sundaland would have had a tropical rainforest climate, typically hot and humid, with warm temperatures all year round, and it would have had a distinct wet and dry season, which would have been honestly quite similar to the climate of the area in modern times. As more land was exposed in ancient times, the landscape would be quite different from what it looks like today. It would have been a landmass with beautiful rivers, vast rainforests, lakes, plains, mountains, and even savanna. But it would have had an even richer variety in flora and fauna than that we see on the remaining islands today. The forests on Sundaland would have had a variety of hardwood trees, like for instance the dipterocarps, which are tall towering trees, hardwood trees, that are still found in Southeast Asia's rainforests in modern times. And the canopy of the forests on Sundaland would have been multi-layered with the tall towering hardwood trees, bamboo, ferns, rattan, and possibly flowering species like orchids and figs, but it would also have had plants like palms and bananas that would have been growing in the area in abundance. Sundaland would have also had extensive wetlands and river systems, these rivers being the major sources of fresh water, and would have supported many aquatic and semi-aquatic species, like for instance crocodiles, waterfowl, and large fish. Large river deltas would have been formed, which created the perfect fertile ground for wildlife and vegetation, and coastal mangrove forests would have extended along the edges of the ancient landmass of Sundaland, which would have provided an important habitat for marine life. There was actually quite some megafauna living on the Sundaland landmass. Like for instance, the stegodon, which is a relative of the modern-day elephant, as well as other now extinct elephant species like the cynomastodon. The Sumatran rhino was a hairy forest-dwelling species, while the Javan rhino inhabited the wetter lowlands. Widespread across the land of Sundaland would have been the tapirs and the deer and the banteng, which is a wild bovine species. And this all would have been very common in the savanna and the open forest areas, while the wild water buffalo would have lived in the floodplains and swamps. There were quite some carnivorous predatory species living on Sundaland as well, like for instance the Sunda tiger, the Sunda clouded leopard, while normal leopards were found mainly in the regions of the modern-day island of Java, but it's possibly that they roamed in other parts of Sundaland as well. There was also a wild dog species that is still living in modern times that was already living on the grounds of Sundaland, and this species is known as Cuon alpinus, but sometimes better known as the dhole. These wild dogs would have hunted in groups in the open woodlands, actually much like they still do in modern times. There were also civets, martens, and bears, including the Malayan sun bear, living on Sundaland. So like I said, quite some carnivorous predatory species all roaming around here back in the day. But there really seems to have been a very good mix of predator and prey species living here on Sundaland. Orangutans used to live throughout the rainforests of Sundaland, and later on this species split into the modern lineages living on the islands of Borneo and Sumatra. There were also gibbons, macaques, leaf monkeys and tarsiers living on Sundaland, as well as wild pigs, porcupines, civets, tree shrews, flying lemurs and many rodents. As you can imagine, there were a lot of amphibians and reptiles living on Sundaland as well. Like for instance, the saltwater crocodiles in the coastal areas and the freshwater Siamese crocodiles, which would be living in the inland rivers and swamps. Tortoises and many different turtle species were found on Sundaland as well as geckos, skinks, monitor lizards and agamid lizards. But there were also a whole bunch of snakes. Wide variety of snakes like pythons, cobras, pit vipers, boas, and colubrids. And there were also a whole lot of frogs and toads. Sundaland seemed to have been teeming with wildlife back in the day, of which we can still see the remnants in modern times, with its wild variety still living in the area nowadays. But these weren't just the only animals living on Sundaland. There were ancient, now extinct humans living on Sundaland as well. We know of 5 species of humans that lived in this area back in the day, of which 4 are now extinct. So as I mentioned all the way in the beginning of this video, around 1.5 or 1.6 million years ago, Homo erectus, the first human species to even leave the African continent, seemed to have arrived in the region of the modern-day island of Java. Like I said, they most likely simply just walked there. Homo erectus living in Sundaland were creating and using simple stone tools, and they likely controlled fire during this time here as well. Then, around 1 million years ago, the dwarf species, also known as the hobbit species, better known as Homo floresiensis, emerged on the edge of the Sunda shelf in what is in modern times the island of Flores, which by then would have most likely have been separated from mainland Sundaland already, since we have found fossils of the dwarf elephant species on only this island as well. So it seems like Flores was already cut off from the rest, which is why we see species only on this island. I have actually made a full deep dive into Homo floresiensis twice now on my channel, but I will link you to my most recent one if you want to learn more about this incredibly tiny and enigmatic species. Link to that down in the description, or click the card in the upper right corner. Just northeast outside of what would have been Sundaland would have been the modern-day islands of the Philippines, where the now extinct human species of Homo luzonensis lived back in the day. And it's possible that this species lived on Sundaland as well. It is also very highly likely that the now extinct human species of the Denisovans lived on the Sundaland landmass as well. And the reason that we think that the Denisovans, Dragon Man, Homo longi, whatever you want to call it, lived here on the Sundaland landmass as well, has everything to do with the amount of genetic evidence of Denisovan ancestry found in the modern-day Southeast Asians and Melanesians, which implies interbreeding here on Sundaland, or at the very least, nearby the Wallace Line. And then, around 70,000 years ago, It seems like our own species, Homo sapiens, modern humans, finally reached Sundaland as well. And our own species may have coexisted with these other named species and possibly replaced some of them as time went on. Eventually, our own species of Homo sapiens, modern humans, were the only living human species left on this planet. We were living on Sundaland, and around 18,000 years ago, the sea level started to very slowly rise, and they kept rising up until around 5,000 years ago. So in 13,000 years, the sea level rose with approximately 120 meters, which wasn't a fast sea level rise. It seems to be very gradual, very slow, a little less than 100 meters per 1,000 years. You probably barely would have noticed if you lived back then. But as the sea levels were rising, the humans and various animal species that lived on Sundaland all started to retreat to higher grounds. And these higher grounds started to become separated from each other. And eventually, these became the islands of the region that we are all so familiar with in modern times. Around 5,000 years ago, Sundaland, the massive landmass, was lost to us. And in its place are the beautiful islands of the Southeast Asian region. But just because Sundaland is lost now, doesn't mean that it will be lost forever. If our planet goes into another glacial period, a cold period where the ice sheets advance and grow again, the sea levels would start to go lower. And over time, it's very possible that Sundaland may once again rise above the sea and flourish once more. And if that happens, Doggerland will most likely rise alongside Sundaland here in northwestern Europe. These lost worlds are lost to us in this day and age. But our descendants may one day once again roam these lands, which is a beautiful but also quite terrifying thought. That would mean that the climate has to change a whole lot, which may not be very good for our species. I'm not sure if we actually want that to happen, but there is a chance. Sundaland may be lost, but it is not forgotten, and it seems like the ancient myths of a lost land or flood stories of old may have actually originated from the Austronesian oral traditions. So, what do you think of Sundaland? Let me know in the comments down below. Would you have wanted to live there? Would you have wanted to visit if you had the chance? Like, if there's a time machine, would you go back in time and see Sundaland or Doggerland with your own eyes? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, and click that bell icon if you want to be notified whenever I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click the card in the upper right corner, or click one of the links in the description down below, or click a video in the end card. And I actually implore you to watch my older stuff. I haven't been creating a lot because my ankylosing spondylitis has been fucking me up. And I started my new medication, which is injections every 2 weeks, and it ain't fun, and I'm very tired and fatigued, and I just want to sleep all the time because I'm in pain, and I don't like being in pain. So yeah, and I like to pay my bills, sorry. So watch my stuff. You don't need to send me money, just watch my stuff. Just watch everything I already made. Please. Okay, but with that said, I also want to really thank my channel members and my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting me. Truly, it means the world to me to know that I'm not giving you anything in return, because I really don't. I don't have that option. I'm already like, I've got way too much on my plate already with life as it is. So I'm sorry for not doing anything in return. I'm going to try and do like a 1-hour live stream where I will play the game Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey. You start as like a chimp and you have to make your way through the Stone Age and Bronze Age and all that stuff and create civilization and become modern humans. It might be fun. I tried to play the game a couple years ago and it's really difficult, so I might need to have all y'all's expertise in the chat while I play. Might be fun. If it's not something that we are enjoying as a group, or me as a creator, or you as the viewer, I might just try it out a few times and then stop and do other stuff. I will try to live stream a little bit more. But yeah, November 14th will be my birthday. I will be turning 34. Damn, I'm getting old. Still young compared to most people that watch my stuff, but still, I'm starting to get a little bit old. I started this channel as I had just turned 28? Yeah, 28. Damn. It's been a while. Okay, so with this said, I will see you in the next video. I have a fun collaboration coming up. I have some fun video projects coming up. There will be some sponsorships in the very near future. And yeah, I've blabbed enough and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye!